Fixed income, risk and return, your end of chapter questions from curriculum. A buy and hold investor purchases a fixed rate bond at a discount and holds the security until it matures. Which of the following sources of return is least likely to contribute to the investor's total return? Total return is composed of three things. Number one, principal and coupon. Two, coupon reinvestment. Three, gain and loss when you sell the bond before maturity. So which of the following sources of return is least likely to contribute to the investor's total return over the investment horizon? Since investment horizon is equal to the term of the bond, so there will be no capital gain and loss. Why? Because you held on to the bond till maturity. So when the bond will be paid off at maturity, so the face value was equal to the carrying value. So there is no gain and loss. Yes, there are these things involved, but there is no capital gain or loss issue as you held on to the bond till maturity. The capital gain and loss arises when you sell the bond somewhere between the issuance and redemption. So since it was held on till maturity, so there is no capital gains involved. This is least likely to be the case here. And that's why it makes the right answer. Gentlemen, I suggest what we suggest in our CMA CIA trainings, and it's essentially very important, and I hope it will work for you as well. Normally what we do, we just read the correct option, that this is correct, and we ignore why not B, why not C. This is very essential, because if you know the exact reason why not B, why not C, this would help you understand three things from a single question. Technically, you have done three questions by doing just one question. So I totally endorse you guys that you should follow the strategy of doing each option, convincing yourself why the right is right, why the wrong is wrong. That's what my belief is. I have always been a question guy. I focus more on questions, very little on theory. Theory really makes me bored. And I believe that's why many of my students in professional certifications with very humble backgrounds were able to qualify, because they knew how to solve a question. Because on the exam, the examiner doesn't ask you to recite what you have read or memorized. He just asks you to do the question, and you should be able to do the questions correctly. That's what my belief is, and it has worked so far. Which of the following sources of return is most likely exposed to interest rate risk for an investor of a fixed rate bond who holds the bond until maturity? If you hold the bond till maturity, there is no going to be any risk related to capital gains and loss, because you are holding on to the bond till maturity. So there is basically no such risk of gain and loss. Redemption of principal? No, you are going to get the full proceeds of the bond at maturity. The risk that you might be facing is the reinvestment of coupon bonds, coupon payments. The YTM may change over the course of the bond, so you might not get the terminal value of the bond that you were originally anticipating. So this is the risk we are most likely to be exposed to. C is the right answer. We discussed this in our overview of the reading just a little while ago. Next, an investor purchases a bond at a price above par, $1 or $5 for example. 2 years later, the investor sells the bond. It means before maturity, as far as we can see. So the resulting capital gain or loss is measured by comparing the price at which the bond is sold to. If you remember, I just gave you the example. If you sell a bond, it's like comparing the carrying value with the selling price. Like for a long-lived asset, you compare the selling price of the asset versus the book value of the asset. So it's something like that. So how the resulting capital gain and loss is measured by comparing the price at which the bond is sold, that is the disposal price, versus the carrying value, right? That makes perfect sense. Not the original price, because the original price, if it was above par at premium, so you need to amortize it to the face value by the time it matures. So it's changing. Original price, if it's discount bond or premium bond, the carrying value changes every year when the discount is amortized. So original purchase price plus the amortized amount of premium, wrong. Premium amortization is reduced from the purchase price, whereas the discount is added. I'm sure you would remember this from your earlier FRA readings where we learned how to amortize the discount and premium. So A is the correct option. Gentlemen, that's the idea. See every option, why the right is right, why the wrong is wrong. Next. An investor purchases a 9-year 7% annual coupon payment bond at a price equal to the par. Right? After the bond is purchased and before the first coupon is received, interest rate increases to 8%. That is, the investor sells the bond after 5 years, that is 4 years before maturity. Assume that the interest rates remain unchanged at 8% over the 5 years holding period. Per 100 of par value, the future value of the reinvested coupon payments at the end of the holding period is closest to. Now gentlemen, 100 times 7, that is $7. So this is what you are getting every period. You held on to the bond for 5 years, that is N is 5. Interest rate per period 8, right? And we need to calculate the future value, FV. And for PV, it has to be 0. 7, 5, 8, 41.066, which is approximately 41.7, so that makes C to be your correct option, right? You can do this way or you can use the TVM computation, whichever you are comfortable. Is totally up to you, the way you want to do it. All right, next question is related to the one we have done. I think the information is the same, but this time the requirement would be different. The first pair is the same. The capital gain or loss per 100 of par value resulting from the sale of the bond at the end of 5 years holding period is closest to. Now we need to calculate the gain and loss. Since the bond is a 9 years bond and we are selling it at the end of year 5, so we will have to calculate. Remember, we purchased the bond at 100. This is the amount we bought it. Coupon payment bond at a price equal to par, we paid $100. Right? That was our carrying value, right? So we will have to see what is the value of the bond at the end of the 5 years. So for this, what are the numbers you will be using? Okay, now the remaining period, there are 4 remaining periods. So N is equal to 4. Then the payments you are receiving is $7. The future value or face value is 100. Interest rate per period is 8. What you need to calculate is the present value. If you punch in these numbers, the price you will get is 96.69, the PV. So this is the price at which you would have sold the bond, and this is the price at which you bought the bond. So basically this is the carrying value and this is the disposal value or the sale value. So the difference between what you paid versus what you got, this difference of $3.31 is your loss. So that makes B to be your correct option, right? Moving on, see, he has done this way. You can use TVM, whichever way you want. You are comfortable is perfectly fine. All right, so finally, assuming that all coupons are reinvested over the holding period, that is 5 years, you hold on to the bond for 5 years, the investor's 5 years horizon yield is closest to. If you remember the first part here, we 41.066, that was the number. Future value of the reinvested coupon payments. All right. So future value of reinvested coupon payments was $41.066. When you sold the bond, what you received was, in the previous example, 96.69, if I'm not wrong, 96.69. 96.69. If you add these up, 137.75 $1.56. This is what you received. And how much did you invest? You invest $100. So you invested $100 and your terminal value of the total investment was 137.756. So I would like to calculate the holding period yield, of course, on per year basis. So basically, it's going to be a simple arrangement like this, that you invested a certain amount, 100. It grew at R% for 5 years and gave you a total terminal value of 137.756. So making R the subject of this equation, 1 plus R raised to the power 5 is equal to 137.756 upon 100. So taking the fifth root, R is equal to 1.37756 minus 1. If you do the computations, and the number that I can see here in the correct options is about, it's 6.62%. Right? So that gives you B. This is your overall holding period return over the period of 5 years to which you held the bond. So that makes B to be the correct option. Next, an investor buys a 3-year bond with 5% coupon paid annually. The bond with a yield to maturity of 3% is purchased at a price of 105.657223. This is basically the current price, that is PV not normally, per 100 of par value. Assuming 5 basis point changes in yield to maturity, 5 basis point, that is 0.05. The bond approximate modified duration. Now this is what I was saying, that we will do this approximate modified duration through questions. Let me show you where it was in our reading. So this is what we just skipped in our reading. Now we will calculate the approximate modified duration using this formula. So now the time comes that we will now apply this formula to further clarify our understanding. So now you will apply this formula here. Approximate modified duration is equal to PV negative, the price when the YTM falls, minus PV upon 2 into change in yield into PV naught. That's the formula we just saw a little while ago. So what do we need? We have just one element out of these, and we have to calculate these two. How we do that? TVM would help you do this computation quickly. In the first case, since we're talking about 5 basis point, the current YTM is 3, so a reduction of 5 basis point means it's going to be 2.95% in one case, and when you increase the YTM by 5 basis point, it's going to be 3.05 in another case. So it's going to be yield per period, interest rate per period. All right. Now, the PMT in both cases is 5. Face value, both cases is 100. What is the term of the bond? 3. So N is going to be 3, 3. Right? What do we need is the PV. In this case, it's going to be PV negative. This case is going to be PV positive. So when you punch in these numbers in your TVM computations, what you will get is 105.804 here and 105.51 here. The computations are quite straightforward. So plug in these numbers here upon 2, 5 basis point change, that's 0.0005 times the price, and when you simplify this all, it's going to be 2.70. So it's not, the formula might look a little daunting. You just need to use the TVM accurately. You just need to plug in these PV negative, PV plus, and that's quite straightforward. Works. Not just a little practice will help you to grip this idea. So this is simply 2.78 duration, approximate modified duration A. A is the right answer. See, he's calculated these using this way. I recommend TVM computation. It will take time. You punch in the numbers in TVM and you'll get these numbers straightforward, and then you can plug it in the formula. Next, which of the following statements about duration is correct? Effective duration is a measure of yield duration. No. Effective duration is a measure of curve duration, and modified duration is a measure of yield duration. If it was little hazy during our reading, so this would have enhanced your understanding through questions. Let me show you. Gentlemen, this is how you enhance upon your understanding. Yield duration based upon YTM. Curve duration, also effective duration, is the change in the yield curve. Sensitivity, the bond price with respect to the benchmark yield curve change. So here is the effective duration. The driver is the change in curve, but for the approximate modified duration, the driver is the change in yield. So that's an important point to be kept in mind. So both A and B are written in totally opposite order, which means they cannot be the correct option. So modified duration cannot be larger than the Macaulay duration, assuming positive yield to maturity. This is a true statement. Why? Because modified duration is equal to Macaulay duration upon 1 plus R. Since there is positive yield to maturity, R is positive. So when R is positive, this denominator would be greater than 1. Since having a denominator greater than 1 means the overall fraction would be lower. So Macaulay duration cannot be larger than, the modified duration cannot be larger than Macaulay duration. This is the correct statement. C is the right option. Next. An investor buys 6% annual payment bonds with 3 years to maturity. The bond has yield to maturity of 8% and is currently priced at 94.845806 per 100 of par. You need to calculate the bond's Macaulay duration. What it is, I'm sure you remember, you will take the coupon 66, coupon plus principal 106, discount them at the rate of 8%. This is what you do, we just done a little while ago. So discounting these coupons and the principal at 8% YTM gives you 5.555, gives you 5.144. Straightforward maths, there is no twist in it whatsoever. So the total value of all these coupons and the present value of the principal is 94.8458, for example. Now, taking this as a base and expressing all of these as percentages, the first coupon payment has a weight of 5.85. This one has a weight of 5.423. This one has 88.71. Multiplying these with the number of years outstanding, these payments will give you Macaulay duration of 2.8286 years. This is the time between the bond with the 3 years maturity where the market price risk and the reinvestment risk are the same. We discussed this in our reading in detail. So that is C. This is the computation you have to do. He has given you an alternative closed form formula, and this formula is even more difficult than this computation. So whichever method you want to use, this isn't given anywhere in Schweizer, might be given in your CFA curriculum, but this is pretty straightforward, no big deal here. The interest rate risk of a fixed rate bond is embedded call option is best measured by, as we discussed in our reading, the bond with the embedded options call or put and the asset-backed securities, their interest rate risk is measured through effective duration. This is a pretty straightforward question approach, just like textbook approach, I would say. Next, which of the following most appropriate for measuring bond sensitivity to shaping risk? Just at 1 basis point, we would like to measure the change in the bond's price just by 1 basis point change. This is, we discussed in our reading, it's key rate duration. It's key rate duration is again a straightforward textbook type question. Next, this is a good one. We need to calculate the effective duration of the pension fund's liabilities. Let's read this, a good one. A Canadian pension fund manager, question like these are good, will refine your understanding. A Canadian pension fund manager seeks to measure the sensitivity of her pension liabilities to market interest rate changes. The manager determines the present value of the liabilities under the 3 interest rate scenarios. the base rate of 7, at which the present value of the liabilities is this, a 100 basis point increase in rates up to 8, and 100 basis point drop to 6, and these would be the present value of the liabilities. Since it's not a single bond, it's a collection of liabilities, pension liabilities. So for this, effective duration using change in curve, not the change in yield. So we will first write down what we have been given and accordingly plug those into the formula. So we have been given negative as 510.1, 37.73.6, and this is PV naught. So you just have to plug it in the formula. Effective duration is equal to PV negative, that P1 510.1 less 373.6 upon 2 into the changes 100 basis points, that's 0.01 times PV naught, that is 455.4. So plugging all these in your simple calculator computation gives you 14.99. So this is the effective duration of the pension fund liabilities. It was quite a straightforward question. All the numbers were given, so there was no requirement for computation of present value. See, that's 14.99b. Next, which of the following statements about Macaulay duration is correct? A bond coupon rate and Macaulay duration are positively related? No. Macaulay duration is a measure of risk. So coupon rate and the duration, they move in the opposite direction. It's incorrect. Bonds Macaulay duration is inversely related to yield to maturity. Correct. Yield to maturity and the risk, they move in the opposite direction. This is a correct statement. And why not C? The Macaulay duration of zero coupon bond is less than its time to maturity. Zero coupon bond, they do not pay regular interest payments or coupon payments. Therefore, the Macaulay duration of a zero coupon bond is its time to maturity. So this is wrong. Not less than, is equal to its time to maturity. So B is the right option. Assuming no change in credit risk of a bond, there is no change in the credit risk of the bond, the presence of an embedded put option. Put option is in the hands of the holder, investor, since it gives you the option to put the bond back to the issuer. So what does it do for you? It reduces the risk for you. If you have the embedded option in the bond, put option, it reduces the risk for you. And effective duration, since it's the measure of the risk, so it reduces the effective duration of the bond, right? The put option is for the benefit of the holder, so it reduces the effective duration of the bond. So that makes A to be the correct option. Otherwise, all these are in opposite direction, increase or stay the same. Wrong, rather, put option reduces the effective duration of the bond. So that A is the correct option. Next, a bond portfolio consists of the following three fixed rate bonds, bond A, B, C. I think we have done it in our reading. If you remember, this was covered in our reading. We had these three bonds. These are their market values, a total of 390. And these are their modified duration. So we need to calculate the portfolio modified duration. So we have done it in our reading. So I think if you want to do it, it's not a big deal. It's just that you have to calculate a weighted average portfolio duration. For this, take 170K. I'm just going to write 170 upon 390 times 5.42. B is the total 120 out of the total 390 value, the portfolio times 8.44, and 100 upon 390 multiplied by 10.38, and simplifying all this gives you 7.62. A. A limitation of calculating bond portfolio duration, just like the one we did it previously, as the weighted average of the year's duration of the individual bonds that compose the bond portfolio, is that it assumes a parallel shift to the yield curve. If you remember, that's what we did in our reading, that calculating the bond portfolio duration this way, where just add up the weighted average of the yield's duration, it is an assumption that there is a parallel shift in the yield curve. This is not always the case. Sometimes the yield curves move pivotally this way. So this is one of the limitations of portfolio durations. A is the right answer. Look no further. That's the right answer. Next. Using the information below, which bond has the greatest money duration? Money duration, it was a very straightforward formula. Money duration is simply equal to the annual modified duration multiplied by the full price of the bond. You can do for all of these bonds. For bond A, it is going to be modified duration multiplied by the full price of the bond 85. So it's going to be 5.42 into 85. And as the number I see here is 460.70. For the next one, it's 80 times 8.44. It is 675.20. And for the last one, it is 7.54 modified duration times the full price 85, and that gives you total of 646.78. So the question said, using the information below, which bond has the greatest money duration? Of course, B. This is the biggest number. B is the right answer, and quite straightforward it is. Next. A bond with exactly 9 years remaining until maturity, N is 9, until maturity, offers 3% coupon with annual coupons. So the payment, PMT, is 3. The bond with the yield to maturity of 5% is priced at 85.7835 per 100 par value. The estimated price value of basis point for the bond. Price value of basis point. We know the formula. PVB is equal to PV negative minus PV positive upon 2. So we need to do two computations. First, to find PV negative. So what we are going to do, just one basis point means if it's 5%, so the lower one basis point means it will give you 4.99. One basis point up will give you 5.01. So this is interest rate per period in both cases. N is the same for both. 9, 9. Payments are the same for both. 3, 3. Right? And FV are the same for both 100 and 100. What you need to calculate are the PVs. In this case, it's going to be PV negative. This case is going to be PV positive. So what do we have here? If you punch in these numbers in your TVM, you will get 85.849. And here you will get 85.7196. At just you need to plug in these numbers straight away. 85.849 minus 85.7196 upon 2. This will give you the price value of basis point for the bond, and it is going to be 0.06475, which is very close to option B. See? The second order effect on the bond's percentage price change given a change in YTM. When the YTM changes, let me take you back where it is referring us to. A change in YTM results in, as per the normal computation we do conventionally, this is the price we get, but what we miss is this. This is the second order, the component of convexity that must be added in order to estimate the duration properly. So, gentlemen, the second order effect on the bond's percentage price change is this part that is normally missed in your simple modified duration computation. So this is the element of convexity that must be added. So the second order effect on bonds percentage price change given a change in the yield to maturity can be best described as convexity. That's the adjustment made to get a more better accurate measure. Next, A bond is currently trading at 98.722, that is PV naught per 100 of par. If the bond yield to maturity raises by 10 basis point, right, that is 0.01, the bond's full, 0.01. The bond's full price is expected to fall to 98.669. 98.669. This is if the basis point rise, this will be PV plus. If the bond YTM decreases by 10 basis point, the bond's full price is expected to increase to this. This is PV negative. So we have been given PV naught, PV plus, PV negative, and the change in yield. What exactly he is asking us to do? The bond's approximate convexity. We need to calculate just the convexity. And what is the formula for that? Let us go back. So this is the formula you will use to calculate your approximate convexity: PV negative plus PV plus minus 2 times of PV naught, the current price, change in yield squared into PV naught. Just this formula, plug in the numbers and you get your result. So approximate convexity is equal to PV naught plus PV plus minus 2 times of the current price upon yield square times PV naught. Alright, so plug in the numbers. PV negative is 98.782, PV plus is 98.669, minus 2 times of the current price, that is 98.722, upon 0.001 squared times the current price. And if you simply do the computations, what you get is 70.906 as per the number that I see here. So that makes B to be the correct option, and B it is. A bond has an annual modified duration of 7.02. All right. Annual convexity 65.180. If the bond's yield to maturity decreases by 25 basis point, which is 0.0025 for the computation, the expected percentage price change is closest to. Now let's first see what you will use to calculate the percentage change in full price. So this is the formula you will use. Annual modified duration is given, yield is given, change in yield 1/2, convexity is given. Simply you have to plug in these numbers and straightforward you get your answer, no big deal. So the percentage change in full price is equal to annual modified duration times change in yield plus 1/2 annual convexity times yield squared. You just need to plug in the numbers. Here we go. Negative 7.020 times 0.0025. Is it increase or decrease? Decrease, so it's negative. Plus 1/2. Convexity given is 65.180 times change in yields. Again, since it's negative, it will be squared plus. So if you do all the simplifications, what you will get is 1.78%. C. A bond has an annual modified duration of 7.140, annual convexity of 66.20. The bond's yield to maturity is expected to increase by 50 basis point. The expected percentage price change in. Similar to the previous question, you have been given the duration times, this time there is a change in positive 5 plus 1/2 66.20 convexity adjustment plus 0.005 squared. And all these computations, simply just have to plug in these numbers in your formula. It's going to be negative 0.034873, which is negative 3.49%. So increase in 50 basis point on YTM will cause the full price of the bond to fall by 3.49%. That gives you B as your correct option. Which of the following statements resulting or relating to yield volatility is most accurate? Most accurate. If the term structure of the yield volatility is downward sloping, then short-term rates are higher than the long-term rates, apparently, as it's you see here. But this is the term structure basically. So it's not always true. The long-term yields are more stable than short-term yields. This is an important point to remember here. The term structure normally is downward sloping, but it doesn't always mean that the short-term rates are higher than the long-term rates. Normally the term is downward sloping then. So higher YTM for short-term securities will result in more volatility in short-term securities than the long-term. So this is the right statement. So read the statement again to make full sense out of it. Which is the following statement relating to yield volatility? This is not term only. Yield volatility is most accurate. If the term structure of the yield volatility is downward sloping, it means short-term interest rates are higher, which would result in more volatility in short-term instruments than long-term instruments, which means long-term yields are more stable than the short-term yields. That makes much sense. Now B makes to be the correct option. Next, the holding period for a bond at which the coupon reinvestment risk offsets the market price risk is best approximated by Macaulay duration. How come? Let me show you. When your investment horizon is equal to Macaulay duration, the coupon reinvestment risk offsets the market price risk. That's what we discussed during our overview of reading. So that makes our option C to be the correct Macaulay duration. So C is the right answer. Next. When the investor's investment horizon is less than the Macaulay duration of the bond she owns, then let's go back again. Now in our question, the question says when the investor investment horizon is less than the Macaulay duration, then this is the case applicable. The market price risk dominates coupon reinvestment risk. Let's see. So when the investor's investment horizon is less than the Macaulay's duration of the bond she owns, the market price risk dominates and the investor is at risk of higher rates. So that is the right option. An investor purchases an annual coupon bond with 6% coupon rate and exactly 20 years remaining until maturity at a price equal to par value. The investor's investment horizon is 8 years. The approximate modified duration of the bond is 11.47. The duration gap at the time of purchase is closest to. What is duration gap? Duration gap is the difference between the Macaulay duration minus the investment horizon. That's what you call the duration gap. So have we been given the investment horizon? Yes, that is 8. But we do not have the Macaulay duration. We can calculate that because we have been given the modified bond, the modified duration of 11.40. So we know modified duration is equal to Macaulay duration divided by 1 plus R, which in this case is 6%. Right? So calculating the Macaulay duration by multiplying the modified duration 11.47 with 1.06 gives you 12.158. 12.158. That's the Macaulay duration. So 12.158 minus the investment horizon. So this is your duration gap, and which would be 4.158. So I think this was missed in our reading. So that is now covered through this question. All right, guys. Next question we have is: a manufacturing company receives a rating upgrade and the price increases on its fixed rate bond. So a company got an upgrade on its ratings. This is good for the company, good news for the company. So the price increases on its fixed rate bonds. The price increase was most likely caused by. Now let me take you back. There is no detail given for taxation or liquidity or expected inflation or anything. So this is caused by the credit risk reduction. Likely caused a decrease in the bond's credit spread. So this has resulted in the lower return required. Hence, it has increased the bond price. So this has reduced the credit spread. Resultantly, the bond price is going to go up. Decrease in the bond's credit spread, and that gives you A to be the correct option.